Chapter 1. The Semantics of Feminism. If there's one thing that undoes any hope of progressing feminism, it's that of an agreed definition. The classic response from the most devoted feminist to a person who claims they are not a feminist is consistently along the lines of, "How can you not be a feminist? Feminism means equality, so if you don't support feminism, you are sexist." End of story. It is this claim that keeps many of us tied within the outdated confines of an outdated title. After all, what reasonable person wouldn't want the same opportunities for both their mum and dad, son and daughter, brother or sister, friend or acquaintance? In the Western world, equality is given great societal value, thus to go against feminism must be to go against the value that is good and true, right? Well, not exactly. The feminist movement is almost 200 years old, and the goals within it have understandably changed over time, as has the rest of society. For this book to work, and most importantly for the reader to be able to make the distinctions within feminism, the word must first be analyzed linguistically, historically and socially. To get started, and to establish a single linguistic meaning for feminism, I have kept the initial definition search completely impartial by merely referring to the leading English dictionaries from Australia, the Macquarie, England, the Oxford and Cambridge, and the United States, Merriam-Webster. They define feminism as follows. Macquarie Dictionary. Noun, a movement or doctrine which advocates equal rights and opportunities for women, especially the extension of their activities in social and political life. Radical feminism, noun, a feminist philosophy which holds that the patriarchal social system of Western countries is the root cause of gender inequality. Oxford Dictionary. The advocacy of women's rights on the basis of the equality of the sexes. Cambridge. The belief that women should be allowed the same rights, power, and opportunities as men, and be treated in the same way, or the set of activities intended to achieve this state. Merriam-Webster. 1. The theory of the political, economic and social equality of the sexes. 2. Organized activity on behalf of women's rights and interests. Beyond dictionary definitions, all of which fail to acknowledge its meaning relative to a period in time, traditional gender study scholars have divided feminism into 3 periods, also known as waves. Although some argue we are still in third-wave feminism, to guarantee absolute distinction between differences in time and varying dictionary definitions. This book will focus almost entirely on fourth-wave feminism, exploring its social, legal and economic effects globally. Again, the feminist movement is almost 200 years old, and the goals within it have understandably changed over time, as has the rest of society. Equally, meanings of words change over time. Just as gay used to mean happy, faggot was a bundle of sticks, coon was a brand of cheese, a dike was an aquatic wall, and church meant everything that was good. Words change over time. Therefore, it is not reasonable to hijack a 200-year-old word and pretend it has never changed in any way over 2 centuries. Feminism is ever evolving to adapt to an ever-evolving society. Not even the world's leading English dictionaries can come to a consensus on its exact definition, although all definitions do specifically relate to advancing women comparative to men. Thus, the suggestion that feminism today means the same thing as it did 2 centuries ago, particularly as it relates to something as fluid as people and society, is unreasonable at best. The laws and social norms that dominated society just decades ago are completely different to what we all face today, hence the feminist movement must continually adapt and evolve to survive. Further, suggesting that one, or a few persons' interpretations of a word which attempts to describe the intent or actions of many individuals as an unchangeable constant, goes against any attempt to include logic, reason or reality within the equation. Finally, implying that feminism, a social movement without democratic leadership or direction, is to have one undeniable and unmovable meaning is nothing short of absurd. To be clear, whilst there is still debate amongst gender theorists as to if we are in third or fourth wave feminism, this book argues the world has unequivocally moved into fourth wave feminism. This book is not about women. The criticisms of feminism within this book are specifically related to that of what has evolved into today's relentless submission to the political and social movement that is fourth-wave feminism. Inevitably the predictable left wing will commandeer any opportunity to cry misogyny to avoid logic, discussion, criticism or accountability. I ask that you as the reader do not submit to the pre-programmed norm of being offended by any and everything that challenges the chameleon of so-called political correctness that aims to suppress the freedoms of speech, expression, and progress. Brief history. First-wave feminism commenced in the 19th century and was primarily focused on women's suffrage, ensuring legal rights for women such as the right to vote, own property, have guardianship of their children, increased access to education and the ability to work in fields that were previously only available to men. First-wave feminism involved organized protests by women's groups, as well as acts of civil disobedience such as when the infamous Susan B. Anthony, a women's suffragist, was arrested for trying to vote during a presidential election. Despite the initial resistance, first-wave feminism saw significant advances for women's rights primarily in the Western world, but also throughout all cultures. Second-wave feminism commenced in the 1960s, and although it addressed the continued legal inequalities between the genders, such as divorce and custody laws, it was primarily focused on women's cultural and social liberation. Second-wave feminists sought to end inequalities in the workplace and achieve more equal status in the home. Concurrently, second-wave feminism started an open discussion about women's sexuality and sought to increase the availability of contraceptives. It was towards the end of second-wave feminism that misandry, man-hating, evolved and gained momentum. Although there were some shortfalls in second-wave feminism, it was overall successful in achieving greater equality for women in Western societies. Third-wave feminism emerged in the mid-1990s. It was led by so-called Generation Xers who were born in the 1960s and '70s in the developed world and came of age in a media-saturated and culturally and economically diverse setting. Although women benefited significantly from the legal rights and protections that had been obtained by first and second-wave feminists, they also critiqued and expanded on the benefits, positions, and opportunities of what they felt was the unfinished work of second-wave feminism. Greater emphasis was placed on compensation as well as equal outcome over equal opportunity. As such, positive discrimination campaigns, laws and policies designed to benefit and advance women over men were drafted and approved throughout Western governments globally. Fourth-wave feminism. Today's feminism is undeniably anti-male, anti-West, anti-capitalist, and anti-white while being pro-victimhood status, pro-Marxism, socialist, and pro-marginalization. While the first two waves of feminism were primarily about equalizing the value of men and women, third and fourth wave feminism is being viewed differently by society as it's primarily about anything white male or Western being inherently evil, unnatural and wrong. It concurrently demands compensation, entitlement, revenge, reward and suffering for injustices, perceived or actual, to be the burden of all men and boys, particularly those who are white. Irrespective of the white man who is dying, disabled or destitute, he is seen and thus treated as part of a so-called patriarchy or boys' club who plot to destroy women or anyone who is not a white male and their rights. The fourth-wave feminist is extreme, eccentric, egocentric, emotional and entitled thus throughout this book. We will be referring to these individuals as the Efem. Note I will be referring to the Efem as female throughout this text. However, I emphasize that not all Efems are female and not all females are an Efem. I implore that you maintain this distinction as equally as important as the distinction between fourth-wave feminism and feminism itself throughout the book and beyond. With no regard to what sacrifices and gains were made by the first and second-wave suffragettes, the fourth-wave Efem strives to undo all that has been achieved in synergizing the sexes. Today, feminism seeks to divide the West through sexist and racist labels, ensuring there are ultimately only two sides: the oppressed and the oppressor, or more precisely, every human on one side, and the evil white male on the other. As Western governments bow down to those who scream the loudest, national security, health, happiness, national pride, and families are destroyed in an attempt to gain votes. Irrespective of how offensive, sexist or racist the belief or statement may be, as long as it targets men, especially the white ones, it will be supported by mainstream media and eventually legislated by submissive and more increasingly incompetent governments. For example, one of the countless Fourth-Wave-Fem groups, Feminist Fertile Group, FAT, Loud and Proud, publish grossly sexist and perverse anti-male claims such as the following: all men are rapists. Let me tell you, sisters, all men are disgusting animals, pigs. Every time a man sees a woman, he undresses her in his mind, and that is the first offense. It's the precursor to rape. He is premeditating rape. Even if he doesn't go through with it, he has the mind of a rapist. It's no different from a man pointing a gun at you. He shows intent even if he fails to pull the trigger. Don't be fooled. Concurrently, the modern Efem is intent on labeling virtually anything men do as sexist. For example, sitting on a subway may seem harmless, but not to the Efem. To the Efem, a man sitting on public transport with his legs too far apart is allegedly asserting his male privilege and dominance over all women by taking up more space. To a normal person, there's a tall person sitting on a small seat. To an Efem, it's a sexist act that degrades women and must be stopped by law. It also must be given the sexist title as manspreading. Alarmingly, so-called well-respected feminists continue to freely spread sexist propaganda that has clearly nothing to do with gender equality, and everything to do with targeting and oppressing one gender over another. For example, here are just a few anti-male or supposedly gender-neutral quotes from prominent Western feminist figures disguising their hate and misandry under the stolen cloak of feminism. Robin Morgan. I feel that man-hating is an honorable and viable political act, that the oppressed have a right to class hatred against the class that is oppressing them. Sally Miller Gearhart. The proportion of men must be reduced to and maintained at approximately 10% of the human race. Julie Bindel. I would love to see a women's liberation that results in women turning away from men and saying, when you come back as human beings, then we might look again. Such anti-male rants are not limited to Tumblr, Twitter or Facebook feeds. We see larger organizations and media outlets amplifying the opinion of the man-hater. In Australia, the government openly funds campaigns that paint every man and boy as a predator and danger to all women. In many Western countries, legal policies are approved that openly allow women to commit paternity fraud without consequence to the woman. Yet actual fiscal penalty or jail time for a man failing to pay for a child that was never his. The justice system is being turned on its head as the fundamental presumption of innocence or procedural fairness is void for any man accused of sexual misconduct even if he has never met his accuser in his life. And this is just the tip of the ice of what it means to support fourth-wave feminism. The immense amount of anti-male rhetoric throughout both mainstream and social media leave little question as to why so many are moving away from the man-bashing Efem. Her purpose has nothing to do with equality or fairness, and everything to do with misandry and racism. The standing argument of virtually any type of fourth-wave feminist, irrespective of their actions or protests, is that feminism is about equal rights for men and women, and as such, anyone who questions feminism in any way must be by default a sexist and therefore must be silenced, even if it means being violent. The untouchable Teflon shield of the Efem today is, you must agree with feminism, or you are a sexist who hates women and must be punished. Violently punishing anyone who thinks differently is not only justified, it's virtuous. This bullying tactic through the oppression of both free speech and free thought is remarkably similar to how the religions used to deal with anyone who questioned their club. You believe in what the church says, or you are the devil, thus must be burned alive. So why are more realizing that today's feminism, that being fourth-wave feminism, is about hating men? Well, let us briefly look at just a few of the endless comments openly published by the Efem on social and mainstream media. Laurel Weitz #Hobby Lobby. I would personally like to castrate every male conservative Christian so they have no reproductive rights. #End Father's Day. Women want rapists, murderers, and child abusers. We need only lesbian parents in the world. I want misandry tattooed across my knuckles so when I punch boys, I can absorb their male tears. Samantha Allen explains why she hates men. I'm not an angry feminist. I'm a furious one. To suggest any such violent, perverse, sexist or extreme comments are reasonable or justified, simply because it was said by the majority gender about the other, is nothing short of madness. Attempting to promote such speech because it comes under the title of feminism, suggests that feminism itself does not believe in what it claims to seek. First-wave feminism started out with the intent of achieving equality for the sexes, however, this does not and cannot deny the fact that it has since evolved into an unstructured emotionally driven rant against men, largely if not entirely screamed by the self-proclaimed victimized, allegedly oppressed woman and any minority she chooses to join her club who takes for granted entirely her unmatched and never-before-seen first-world privileges. The evolution of fourth-wave feminism has not stopped at the destruction of anything that is male. In recent years it has expanded into the hatred of white women, particularly if they are skinny and/or attractive. Even worse, if a woman supports men's rights, which do of course form part of human rights, she can expect to be bullied, harassed, threatened and even violently attacked by the Efem who strives to ensure men have no rights because, in the Efem's mind, men should not be viewed as human particularly if they are white. Considering all that fourth-wave feminism attempts to destroy whilst hiding under the misleading and appropriated banner of feminism, the question shouldn't be, why aren't you an Efem, but rather, why would any reasonable person associate themselves with such a radically destructive and hateful political movement? I challenge any reader who identifies as a feminist to pause and reflect on exactly what feminism means today comparative to 10, 50, 100 or even 200 years ago. I challenge today's so-called feminist to consider the possibility that fourth-wave feminism is in fact undoing all that has been achieved by the original suffragettes and their supporters. In a time where the extreme left-wing movement strives to ensure labeling, division, hate and anarchy within the West is the norm, we all need to step back a little and ask, is this really what we are aiming for here? Race shaming, gender shaming, violence, and division? Or should we be embracing our differences with logic, reason, and fairness to ensure synergistic and symbiotic outcomes? I'm not convinced that many who identify as a feminist have made these distinctions. That is, most people strive to be good people. Just as churches in the past implied you could only be good if you were in complete support of their club, fourth-wave feminism strives to do the same. Previously, the social control mechanism was, you're either a Christian who supports and pays the church, alternatively you worship Satan and thus must be punished. There is no other option, there is no middle ground, there is only our way or persecution. Now the same bullying tactic of fear and intimidation by a movement desperately trying to create a divide and dominate control screams, you're either a feminist who supports the left and bows to everything it demands, alternatively you're a sexist racist who must be punished. There is nothing in between. Submit to our ideology entirely or face the UN policed consequences. Again, I ask you as the reader to please maintain this distinction while reading this book. The being feminism, equality, and equity, versus fourth-wave feminism and extreme left-winged ideologies. Rejecting fourth-wave feminism is not about rejecting fairness, equality or equity, nor is about rejecting what has been achieved in the first two waves of actual feminism. In fact, it's the absolute opposite. Rejecting fourth-wave feminism is about rejecting sexism, racism, bullying, intimidation, violence, body shaming, beauty shaming, gender shaming, race shaming, child neglect, economic failure, obesity, terrorism, compromising national security, poverty, grouping and oppressing populations, revenge, misery, self-destruction, double standards, man-hating and the total annihilation of Western civilizations globally.